Hi all! I wanted to test again with my magical seed, which was a previous video, because now I have been testing with seeds for a longer time, letting the simulation run all the way through, and I wanted to see what happens with that seed if we have more iterations, a longer time for the simulation to happen. So, when I press spawn, I'm going to use the same seed as back then, and it was this. But I also saw a problem because when I put out that build of the app, there was a bug where this layer, the sixth layer, was not actually in the center of the simulation. So if you want to use this magical seed, you need to use or build it on the seventh layer of the simulation. It's very important because if it's in the center, it's going to be completely symmetrical, but when it's on the seventh file, it's not going to be symmetrical, and that's where all the magic happens. And I'm going to use 4 and 8 neighbors as the rules, and simulation with the height of 3, and X and Z size will be 180. So when I press spawn, it starts from the initial seed, and some things happen in the beginning which seem to make no difference, but then it actually finds the magical seed which makes all these things. It's just that the actual seed that makes this thing happen is so complex that my brain can never build something like that. But now it's very important to see here that it's not completely symmetrical. Instead, all the 3 layers even seem to be different, and this is what gives rise to all the complexity in the simulation. And if we let this run out, I seem to recall that there were these shapes which look something like a spaceship or something, which fly out of the simulation like they are doing some, what's the word? They're trying to find new things, new planets or something. Exploring is probably what I'm looking for. And then they merge into these bigger shapes here. And I recall that when we use 4 and 12 neighbors, it's going to be even less crowded, and there's going to be even more of these shapes flying around. And let's use a little bit higher speed for a while and see the end result of this 4 and 8 neighbor simulation. So okay, it seems that the simulation will get completely crowded, but this isn't really a problem, since if I now just change the 8 to 12, I would guess the simulation will get less crowded, and then we once again get some kind of shapes flying around. Yeah, and it works. It's 4 and 8 seems to be very good initial rules to get some kind of form emerging, and then you can tweak the rules a little bit. And with the 4 and 12, it's even more directional, so you can have shapes which are going only in one direction, and then only if they collide with another shape will they only also go to another direction. For example, here we have a spaceship flying, which if it collides to something, it can either burst, or now it seems that it spawned 2 other ships. And here once again, it seems it's actually quite common to get this spaceship-like forms flying. There's one here, there's one here. And also with the 4 and 12 neighbors, you will get these standing waves. It's hard to spot them, but sometimes there are this, there, and now the star even. It can end in a star, the shape that emerges, but it does die out eventually. But it's interesting what kind of shapes can emerge with specific rules. Now there's some kind of phoenix bird, which got born here and then flew and disappeared. Okay, but I think now we'll go to the beginning with 4 and 8, and then at some point we are going to change into 4 and 12. Let's put the animations back on. When you use high simulation speeds, it's best to not use the animations, since they're only going to slow down the computer. Okay, now it's spreading out. I guess I can now change into 12. And also I should probably try with 4 and 10 and 12 or 4 and 15 maybe, if that's even viable. There's so many things to try, but I guess 3 and 5 will be too much if I'm going to try to get some kind of linear motion in here. And now this is the 4 and 12, and now it's not, there's a spaceship like thing flying. Now it's not expanding too much. It's going to have these shapes around the simulation, but they're not going to fill the entire simulation. Now there are these two spaceships are going to collide. Let's see if they die out or what happens. Every now and then it looks like an arrow, and now there's, wow, this is very nice. I really like this 4 and 12, since there's not too much going on, so you can actually see some things. Even if we use very high simulation, let's say height 10, there are going to be many interesting things happening, but we cannot see them, so it's better to use usually. I use only height 3 simulation, usually, to actually see something. It is probably even more interesting to have simulation which has more height, but then you cannot see or understand what happens, so that's the dilemma of being a human. But yeah, now even with the 4 and 12, many things are happening. It has somehow expanded, and now there's this very peculiar center which tries to now expand to up and down directions. But this really resembles something like bacteria or something. If it was in a petri dish or something, they would expand similarly to something like this. So I think when they were very excited about Game of Life simulation, how it could be like foundations of how things work or something, there might be something to it, because this is very simple simulation, and even then you can get very complex patterns and patterns which can reproduce and things like that. So it has some kind of merit that reality might work a little bit something like this, or at least this is one interesting way of thinking about how things might work. Of course, our understanding is so limited that it's quite hard to actually understand much, but this is one way to look at it, this kind of simulation. And of course, if there is causality and this kind of things here and rules, and if simulation is driven by logic, I guess fundamentally you can at least simulate reality with using things like Game of Life simulation, and maybe you would even use higher than 3 dimensions, because of course you could have also these cells in the 4th and 5th and 6th and so on dimensions, which you couldn't even see, but they would still have an effect on the simulation. So if you have a system with that kind of complexity, there's really no limit what can come out of it. And even with the 3D Game of Life where you can actually see everything, it's still way too complicated to understand when the simulation size gets big at all. Even simulation with height of 6, which is quite little if we think that this is simulation of reality, we would have almost infinite or infinite size of the simulation. So really understanding what happens there would be quite hard for humans, at least. But yeah, I guess this 4 and 12 has really now run its course, or it hasn't, but now I want to see something more. So let's change with 10, 4 and 10 only, and see how this changes the simulation. It's also interesting to study this kind of things. If you have a simulation which isn't crowded, if you change the rules, how it affects the simulation. And always it's not obvious, because initially it might go into one direction and eventually into some other direction. But you can usually get some kind of idea how that kind of rules will work with the simulation. But I guess this is all for now. I will put the download links into the description. This is available for Android, iOS and Windows, so you should be able to get it for your own device. I encourage you to test with rules of 4 neighbors and then something, because that is quite a nice way to get interesting results. And then just build a seed which has maybe shapes like this, or if I clear this, you could have like 4 here and then something surrounding it above, just so that you will have nests, this kind of nests, or nests where this kind of things will be instantiated on the next turn, will be interesting for you, I think. And also very simple good one is 3 and 5 and then just some simple seed. For example, I would guess this would have some kind of directional effect diagonally with the 3 and 5 neighbors. Yeah, that's actually quite nice. It's easy to get interesting things going on in the simulation. You just need to select some rules and then think a little bit with your seed what kind of form will be the next phase of the simulation. And then you can quite easily get interesting results here. But yeah, I think this is all for now. It's already almost 12 minutes. So have fun testing different rules and seeds, and bye.